Hear the parable of the Good Samaritan from Luke 10, verses 25 through 37. Just then, a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And then he said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." But, wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was walking down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side as well. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, 'Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you have spent.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" He said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise."
So, I don't remember where the protest was, and frankly, it really doesn't matter. There was this woman who was holding a sign, screaming with as much hatred as she could muster at the other protesters and yelling at them, "I am going to teach my grandchildren to hate every single one of you." Wow. You know what my thought was? This is one smart woman. And I don't mean that sarcastically. She knew that hate is taught. We are not born hating. We have to teach it. I know that there are some who say that we are born loving. That's part of our nature. It's part of who we are. And I actually disagree with that. All the study I have done indicates that we are born with a sense of empathy. But empathy and love are not necessarily the same thing. What looks like love in one culture may not look like love in another. And what some people call love, others call abuse. And even in our religious tradition, what some people call love, others of us have experienced as hate. So what is love? That's what was behind Jesus' answer to the lawyer. Of course, the lawyer really wasn't asking about love. That wasn't what he was concerned with. But Jesus has this way of turning questions around to get at the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter wasn't about how this guy could secure eternal life for himself. The heart of the matter wasn't even gaining some sort of agreement about who our neighbor is. The heart of the matter is what love looks like. What does love look like? Love is seeing an injured person, helping them and not counting the cost. Love is compassion. And compassion is the radical, embodied love of God. That really is at the heart of our faith. Jesus Christ is God's radical, embodied love. As the Gospel of John said, for God so loved the world. God so loved the world that God put flesh on that love. We know that flesh as Jesus Christ. And in Jesus, God healed the sick. He cured the lame. He cast out demons. He sat with the grieving. He gave places of honor to outcasts. And he confronted sin. He called people to transform lives. God's love in the flesh. And of course, then what happened after that is Jesus called disciples to follow him, and then he sent them out to be God's love in the flesh, to sit with the grieving, to heal the sick, to give places of honor to the outcasts, and to transform lives. Friends, God sends us to be God's radical embodied love in the world. But like our children, we aren't necessarily born knowing how to do that. Not when the world we live in is more like the world the lawyer knew, a world that told him the most important thing he could do was take care of himself. Did you catch his question? What must I do so I can have eternal life? As people of faith, the most important thing we could do isn't to grasp after something for ourselves. It's to live for others. It's to live with compassion. It's to share God's love with others in real, concrete, physical ways so that they know they are loved. They know they are valued. They know they are forgiven. And they know they are cared for. Love isn't a feeling and it isn't an emotion. It's an action and a choice. If we want our kids to know that love is more than a feeling, then we have to model compassionate love for them and to them. If we want them to know that love is more than a list of behaviors, then we have to show them by the way we live that compassion and love is just a way of life. It's a way of being. Now, we've been blessed to have some remarkable examples of people who embody that kind of compassionate love for others. I'm not going to embarrass them by mentioning their names, but if you've been a part of our congregation for any length of time at all, I'm sure you know several people in our congregation that fit this description. They are people who never hesitate to help when they can. If you need something, they'll drop everything and be right there for you. They never hesitate to speak up when something needs to be said. They never hesitate to tell and to show others that they matter, they are loved, and they are valued. Now, if you don't know anybody in our church, think about other people you know in your life. I'll bet you there's at least one person, at least, who lives that kind of compassionate life for others. And if you're having a hard time figuring out who those people are, look at their kids. Look at how their kids live their lives. Because these people have raised their kids to live lives that show God's radical embodied love in the flesh. You see, what we do and how we live doesn't just stay with us. It has ripples. It impacts people. 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations, 1 block, 2 block, 3 blocks away, miles, towns, cities. How we live impacts others. Because, you know, people are watching us. People watch how we live. It is not always easy to live a compassionate life. Compassion is work. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, the one who stopped to take the time out of his day to help this injured person on the side of the road, you know, he had to stop what he was doing. He had to change his plans. He took this man to a hotel, he put him up, and he paid for his lodging and his care out of his own money. It was work. It required a commitment and a sacrifice on his part. Compassion is work. Do not lessen that. Do not forget that. Compassion has no room for judgment either. At no time did the Samaritan ask the man what his religion was, what his occupation was, who his parents were, what he might have done to have caused people to want to beat him up and leave him on the side of the road. He simply saw someone in need and he helped. Whether we would be so non-judgmental in our lives. It's definitely easier said than done sometimes. Compassion is action. No walking by and telling that person, I'll pray for you, thoughts and prayers. That's not compassion. Compassion is by its very nature action. More like the action God took when God saw our need and came down and became flesh, became one of us. Compassion calls us to be with people where they are and to make a difference. Get involved. And compassion is also life-giving. You know this. You know how compassion changes you when you've received it from someone else, whether it was a meal after a death, whether it was forgiveness for a harm you've done, or an act of reconciliation, or an act of inclusion, someone including you. It changes you. It gives you life. It gives you hope. It lets you know you matter, that you are real and you exist. Many times, Jesus interrupted his day, his plans, whatever he was planning on doing, to touch someone, to heal them, to cast out a demon, to sit with them. And more often than not, when he did that, those people wanted to drop everything and follow him because they longed for and they hungered for more. What Jesus did was give them life, and they wanted more. And so they wanted to follow him. Compassion changes lives. It transforms people. Loving compassion is at the heart of our faith, and it's one of the most important things we can teach our children. In her book, Erin Wathan tells about her son. He absolutely loves food, not just eating it, not just playing with it when he was a little kid. She said by the time he was 3 years old, he could put away the groceries all by himself. And he knew what everything was, and he knew where everything went. He loved looking at recipes. He loved cooking. This kid loved food. So do you know what his parents did? They took that love of food and they brought him down to the local food bank. On Fridays, you could find that kid bagging groceries at the place he called the food helping place. They are stoking the fires of something their son already loves and connecting him with ways he can use that love to show compassion for others. What a great way to teach our kids compassion. Find what they're already loving and show them how they can use that love in compassionate ways to help others. Do that. And I don't care whether they're your kids, maybe they're your grandkids, maybe they're your friends' kids, maybe they're somebody you just met. Find out what they love and connect them with a way to use that love to show compassion to others. And while you're doing that, don't just stop there. Talk to them about God's love, because that is why we do what we do, because God has so loved us. This is our opportunity to share that and pass that on to others. So help these kids see that when they share their love with others, they are really sharing God's love with others. Let them know that they are an important part of something much bigger than themselves. Let them know that they are changing someone's life. Let them know they're making a difference. Of course, the most impactful way of teaching our children to live compassionate lives is if we do it ourselves. By the way, again, it doesn't matter whether you have kids or not, because the kids that are around you are watching you and they're watching how you live. You may not think they're paying attention, but they're noticing what you do and how you do it. And they're taking that all in. And that's helping them figure out how they want to be in the world, how they want to walk through this world. I have no doubt that that woman I mentioned earlier will be incredibly successful in teaching her grandchildren to hate, because they're going to see it in her. What do we want our kids to see in us? Find ways to practice compassion for others. Let yourself be interrupted by someone else's need. Go that extra mile. Give that extra dollar. Speak that kind word, even if you don't want to. Even if it goes against everything in your body. Let's be honest, it's not always easy to show compassion. Sometimes the words and the actions stick in us, and we don't want to do it. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. It's going to make a bigger difference than you can ever imagine. In her book, Erin Wathen says, embodied love exhibited in the moment when it feels most counterintuitive, that's when we don't want to, when we don't feel like it. Embodied love exhibited in the moment when it feels most counterintuitive, that's when the work of compassion holds the greatest power of transformation. That's when compassion has the greatest power to transform you and that other person. I know I can tell you from personal experience, it certainly changes me. When I don't feel particularly good toward someone, and I have my moments, I'll admit that. If I make myself act with compassion anyway, it actually softens my heart. It changes me in a way that I like to see. It changes me for the better. You may be surprised how much you are changed when you love precisely at those moments when you don't feel like it. That's also when you're likely to share the greatest lesson with your kids. So if you're finding it difficult to act in compassion, talk about it with your kids. First of all, do it anyway, but then talk about your struggle with your kids. That will help them learn to make those choices too when they're finding it difficult. By the way, if you really want to change the world, focus on kids and young people. Everybody's important. But practice that embodied love, that living compassion, especially with kids and young people. Because they're still trying to figure out who they are. They're still trying to figure out if this faith thing that we talk about really matters. Does it really change anybody's life? They're trying to figure out how they're going to walk through this world. If they see how living compassion shapes us, they're more likely to invite that into their lives and let it shape them. You know, we're always teaching. The question is, what are we teaching? Are we teaching love or hate? Are we teaching compassion or negligence? Are we showing our kids how to have meaningful, powerful lives? Or are we teaching them to live smaller lives than their potential? Are we showing them by our words and our actions how powerful God's love is in our lives and the power it has to change the world? It's an intentional choice, what we teach. And it's a lesson that's going to stay with the next generation long after we're gone. So choose wisely what you're teaching this next generation.